We have 3 weeks left in this one single story series, and we today are in 3 John, which is actually the shortest book of the Bible. 2 John is assigned less verses, but 3 John has less words, okay? So the verses are something fairly new, right? You understand that? I know they're not new to you, all right, okay? But they're a fairly new addition as far as history goes. But from a word standpoint, the number of words, 3 John is the shortest book of the Bible. And it is about this kind of singular theme that we're calling Christian hospitality. It's probably a little more focused than that, right? And I don't want to ignore that it is probably narrowed down a little bit more than I might deliver it today. But this concept of hospitality isn't, about entertaining or impressing someone with how good you can cook or how nice your house is. But it's more about the ability to welcome people into your group. It doesn't matter, churches can be cliquish. Come on now, right? Don't lie. They can be, especially if you're in a rural South community, right? They can be. Sometimes the whole church is just one clique, right? There's 20 people in the clique, and they're all in it, and nobody else can get in, and they all have to die for somebody new. Don't sit here and act like you don't know what I'm talking about. And so it's about welcoming people into your clique, into your church, into your life, into your small group, whatever that might be, with this in mind, that they feel grace, they feel shelter or covering, and they feel the presence of Jesus Christ. Like that is what real Christian hospitality is about. It is helping people to experience Jesus a little bit better. And the recipient of this letter is someone named Gaius, okay? And there's some things we can suppose about him. There's in the letter, there's nothing else that can be known. There are other people with this name, Gaius, in the New Testament, but it is probably not one of them. Most likely, this is someone that Paul met while he was in Ephesus and doing his ministry there, and that he had become a friend of his, John, in his ministry in Ephesus. Maybe John had become a mentor of his. I don't know. We're not sure exactly his role. There's a couple of things we can suppose. Most likely, he had some type of resources, wealth, we might call it, because he's writing to him specifically about his support of traveling ministers who are coming through his community. And so the thing is, I think we can come to the conclusion that John views him as trustworthy, somebody he can depend on, and he writes this letter to him to talk to him about Demetrius, who needs to be cared for, who's a traveling preacher, and to give him some instructions about another person in the church who's being disruptive and destructive. And he does it in the context of how you welcome these people, sends a message to the world about whether you love God or whether you don't. There's a reason why they say first impressions matter, right? They do. First impressions do matter. You don't have a second chance to make a first impression. And if you make the wrong first impression, it's very difficult to get that out of people's minds, right? It's difficult for them to forget that or remove that from their memory. And so how we meet someone, the hospitality as churches, and I say it like this, and I'll talk about this more in a service, I can't preach a good enough sermon to overcome your bad attitude to somebody who walks in this room. Right? If you fuss at them because they were sitting in your seat or they parked in your parking space, I don't have enough Holy Ghost to overcome that. Right? And so you're already making an impression on people long before they hear my message or long before they hear a song. And so that matters. And so let me talk to you about first impressions in a more humorous light. Okay, so our staff, a couple of weeks ago, we had staff retreat down in Florida, and Dylan, who led worship today, lives in Florida. And so we were going to interview him for a position, and so we invited him over to the house where we were staying. Now, I need to tell you about this house. Anytime you get anywhere in Central Florida, the houses tend to be themed, and sometimes they're extremely tacky. And we were staying in the tackiest of the tacky. It looked like, I don't know, I'm scared to say what's in my mind because it'll offend somebody, so I'll leave that alone. But it was tacky. It was themed as across America, okay? And there were rooms for many of the main attractions across America. Like one of the rooms was St. Louis, and it had the archway. And one of the rooms, the bed was like a launch pad for Cape Canaveral. It was an interesting house. My room was the White House, and it was the tackiest room. It looked like Donald Trump had decorated it on a trailer park budget. It was horrible. I almost showed a picture of it. But it was, when I say tacky, like it was tacky. But in the living area, to carry on the theme, they had a podium with a presidential seal on the front of it, flanked by 2 flags. This is in the living room, okay, right by the kitchen. I'm laughing thinking about this. So Dylan's coming for an interview. We're all meeting during the day, and we decide we're going to punk him. All right? When it came time to eat, we were having tacos that night because when we're together, we eat together. We were having tacos that night. When I said, because we were going to sit around and have an interview, when I said it's time to eat, we were all going to stand up, walk to the podium. I was going to stand behind the podium. Everybody was going to salute, and we were going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Then we got over there, and we decided we need to add the Lord's Army to it. How many of you sang the Lord's Army growing up? Let me see your hands. Oh, so for those of you who've never heard this song, okay, it's a kid's song that I learned growing up. I'm in the Lord's army. Come on. We did the hand motions and everything. I'm in the Lord's army. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. Y'all got the picture now, right? Okay. Y'all got it? Okay. And so he comes, we're sitting in the living room, we're asking him all these questions, and it really got emotional because we were having some kind of heartfelt conversation. And then he led us in a song, The Goodness of God, that we just sang. You know, we're all crying and raising our hands. And I got to the end and I thought, God, it was time to eat. How do you go out of the goodness of God to doing the Pledge of Allegiance with the pastor standing behind the podium? And so I said, in full disclosure, you need to know, we were getting ready to punk you. And the look on these kids' face is, this ain't a real job interview, is it? And so everybody else said, no, we got to do it. I said, okay, it's time to eat. So we all stood up. I went and stood behind the podium. They got there, saluted, started saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we broke out and I'm in the Lord's army, you know. And I look back there and Dylan's trying to figure out what everybody is doing, you know. He's saluting. He didn't know whether he was shooting or riding or flying. I just want to say, you shouldn't do that to your guest, right? Now, this would be a good time to insert, okay? That is why on Sunday morning, we have a lot of structure. Because some of you want it to be free form. Let's do whatever we want to do. But there's a lot of people walking in this room for the very first time. There are some people in this room right now for the very first time. And if we bust out going, I'm in the Lord's heaven, like, where have I come up to? You know, what kind of church is this? And so you have to understand that when people walk in for the very first time, the reason why you have structure is so everybody gets the same experience, or at least as close to the same experience as you possibly can. Now, let me talk to you about three things. Let me say that Scripture tells us that some people have a spiritual gift of hospitality, okay? But the Scripture also tells us that all of us have to practice hospitality. It may not be our gift. You know, I go to some people's houses and I'm like, these are the best hosts in all of the world. And then they come to my house and I got saltines and whatever, you know, it's not as fancy as what they've done because it's not my gift. And it may not be your gift, but we have an obligation. So let's talk about three things. Number one, hospitality includes strangers. This is difficult, right? It can be challenging enough to welcome people you know into your home. Come on. Just be honest. You don't have to pretend. It can be difficult enough to invite people that you already know into your home, okay? Because some of you, that's the reason why. Some of you in this room, the reason why you invite people over is because you need to clean and you know you will clean if they come. Right? I caught some of you, didn't I? But there are times, especially in the church world, where we have to be comfortable with people we don't know. If you ask me, the number one reason why churches don't grow, it has nothing to do with style, because I believe you can sing hymns and have a great church. I believe you can sing contemporary worship and have a great church. I believe you can wear robes and have a great church. I believe you can wear skinny jeans and low-cut V-neck T-shirts and have a great church. The number one hindrance to church growth, period, across the board, is we don't like people we don't know getting involved in what we know. We're uncomfortable with strangers coming in and sitting next to us, sitting in our seat, singing our songs, acting in a way, looking in a way, dressing in a way that we don't know. This is the thing that creates so much tension in church growth, is because we're not comfortable with strangers, right? And he says, dear friend, you are being faithful to God when you care for the traveling teachers who pass through, even though they are strangers to you. Now, as I said earlier, he has a much more narrow focus than I'm probably going to preach today. He is specifically talking about traveling teachers, or what I grew up with as itinerant evangelists, people who went from town to town and preached. And he says, you care for them when they pass through, even though you don't know them. Like you're meeting them for the very first time and you're inviting them into your home and allowing them to stay. Now, this doesn't happen as much anymore for a multitude of reasons, but I grew up in a pastor's home that had multiple revivals a year, and they didn't put them up in a motel and they didn't bring a camper. They stayed in our house. And sometimes it was great to have them there, right? I mean that. Sometimes there was one evangelist that came to our church. He was a young guy. He built me and my brother the coolest tree house you have ever seen in your life, because he was preaching the same 6 sermons that he had preached the week before. He didn't need to study. That was terrible. I shouldn't have said that. So he was building us a tree house during the day. We loved him. There were others that came through, like, I didn't like them so good, and I'm not going to tell you why. But he says, you did a good thing by inviting these strangers in your house. He says, they have told the church here of your loving friendship. Please continue providing for such teachers in a manner that pleases God, for they are traveling for the Lord, and they accept nothing from people who are not believers. So we ourselves should support them so that we can be their partners as they teach the truth. And he says here, he's talking about, he says, these people, when you're friendly to them, go out and tell other people how friendly you have been. Now, there's a couple of things I want to say, because the church makes a mistake here. You don't have to welcome everybody. 2 John last week, 2 Peter 2 weeks before that said if they're preaching a gospel that doesn't match what Jesus said, don't invite them into your home because you're giving them credibility. So sometimes there is exclusions to be made. I want to be clear about that. But for the most part, that's not our problem. For the most part, we don't reject people because they're preaching a gospel opposite of what Christ would preach. It's because they're just strange or they're different or we don't know them and we're uncomfortable with it. And he says we have to be friendly. And I tell people this all the time. I promise you that there are as many people outside of this church sending people to this church as there are people inside of this church inviting people in. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. How did you find Open Door? My real estate agent. Well, what real estate agent? They tell me they go to another church. They didn't invite them to their church. They sent them to this church. Sometimes that scares me. Right? Because I asked this question in Growth Track, and somebody recently said, we moved here, we bought a house. Our mortgage broker, who lives somewhere else, not even here, said, I've heard Open Door is a great church. You should go try it out. And this is how they came. There are people outside. You know why? Those people are happy to send people here because they have either had a good experience or know someone who's had a good experience, and they feel comfortable sending them here because they believe that they will have a good experience. And if we are friendly to people, people will go out and tell other people, hey, those people are really nice. As a matter of fact, I had somebody go through Growth Track recently, and they said they almost didn't come back because the people are too friendly and they weren't used to that in church. That's honest to goodness what they said. He says, but we're supposed to welcome these people in, specifically those who are traveling and preaching the gospel. And he says we're supposed to support them so that we can be partners in what they are doing. Now, part of being hospitable as a church is making sure that those we hire to lead are taken care of financially. And that sounds extremely self-serving, but I am an extremely poor leader if I don't tell you that that is part of this church's responsibility. We don't hire people and ask them to move from Florida or South Carolina or New York or Iowa or wherever they come from and keep them broke all the time. Y'all with me? Okay, just make sure. And the reason why is we become a partner in their work. Like the ministry they're doing when we support someone, and it could be an itinerant evangelist, it could be a missions organization, or it could be a pastor on staff here at our church. When we support them, the work that they do and the difference that they make in the kingdom, we become partners to it. I'm a firm believer that there are going to be people who will greet me in heaven who say, I was saved because you helped support this person to be here to minister to me at this particular time. I believe that with all of my heart. And so he says we have to be willing to welcome strangers, and specifically here he's talking about traveling preachers. The second thing you need to understand is that inhospitable people are envious. Unfriendly churches are jealous of friendly churches. Right? And the reason is they're not willing to change. They want the end result. I preached for my dad last week on his last Sunday. As a matter of fact, my dad's going to be in the service, the next service. Today's his birthday. He's St. Patrick's baby. He turns 80 today. Yeah. And I'm excited. I don't know when the last time I was in church with him 2 weeks in a row. And it was a special service, like I got to preach, and Jesus was there. The actual baby Jesus came. I mean, that's my brother for those of you who don't know. But often people want what other people have. They just don't want to do the work or make the effort that everybody else does. Right. And I'm telling you, we are quickly creating a culture that wants rewards without work. We want what they have, but we don't want to make the sacrifices to get what they got. And we have to understand that when you do things, when you're hospitable, there are going to be people who are envious of you and do not like it. They are not going to appreciate. And the things we want are, we want the power, we want the influence, we want the friendships, we want to be friends with this person. And when we don't, we get frustrated and we say things we shouldn't. He says this, I wrote to the church about this. So what I would tell you is there's a letter that we don't have, right? There's a letter where he wrote somewhere that says this is how you should treat traveling preachers. We just don't have it. But he references it here. He says, I wrote to the church and told you how you should do it. But Diotrephes, who loves to be the leader, refuses to have anything to do with us. Diotrephes is frustrated. He doesn't like it because Gaius is doing what he has been asked to do. He's following the instructions. He's being faithful, and the people in the church are being faithful. But Diotrephes doesn't like it. He doesn't like somebody traveling through and preaching because they'll get influence. And he says, when I come, I will report some of the things he is doing and the evil accusations he is making against us. Not only does he refuse to welcome the traveling teachers, he also tells others not to help them. And when they do help them, he puts them out of the church. Now, let me tell you what this is. This is a divisive person. It's perfectly fine for you and I to disagree. I want you to know I'm comfortable with that. Okay? And sometimes you have to be comfortable with that. But the minute that you go across the aisle and try to get someone to agree with you because you want people on your side, you have suddenly left the disagreement and come divisive. Y'all with me? Okay? There's a difference between disagreement and divisiveness. There's a difference between, okay, I'm not sure this is what I would have done, and then trying to get people on your side. I've seen it all of my life. I grew up in church. Thank God I have not seen that play out here. But I've seen it play out in church all of my life where people wanted influence and they weren't satisfied to express their opinion. They wanted to convince as many people as they possibly could to agree with them. And then when they didn't agree with them, they wanted to exclude them, push them out of the church, tell them they couldn't have anything to do with what was going on. Jealousy will create division. Not only did Diotrephes, his problem was he liked to be the leader and he didn't like anyone else having influence. And you see, that's the challenge of almost every leader, is there is no way that you can lead a large organization and everybody like you. You understand that? You can't do it. As a matter of fact, it's very difficult to lead a family of 4 and all 4 of them like you, right? As a matter of fact, that's probably going to waver from day to day, and it may move around the room, who likes you right at that particular moment. Everybody can't like you, right? That's impossible. What you have to do, if you're going to scale an organization or it's going to be bigger, you have to have people that they do like and allow them to use their influence, and you just influence the person that they do like, right? Let me see if I can say it like this. I am not naive enough to believe that everybody at this church likes me. I'm not naive enough to believe that. I'm smart enough to know, though, you got to like somebody here. Somebody in this room has to influence you. Somebody in this room has to connect with you. That's the person that I'm concerned about, right? Because I can't be all things to all people. I don't sell ice cream and I'm not a clown, right? And so there are times that there will be people in the room who don't like me. I understand that. My goal is not to make everybody like me. My goal is to make sure that there are people in the room that they do like, that do influence them, that they have a good rapport with. Diotrephes' problem was he didn't like that. He wanted everybody to like him, and if you didn't like him, he put you out. Like that was his rule. And that is a terrible way to lead. The scripture tells us in James, it says, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Proverbs 27:4 says, wrath is cruel and anger is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? 1 Corinthians 3:3 says, for you are still of the flesh, for while there is jealousy and strife among you, are you not of the flesh and behaving only in a human way? Jealousy and envy are never satisfied. And I just saw this quote this morning by a lady named Charlotte Gamble. I saw it like right after I woke up, so I put it in my notes. She says, jealousy makes them the enemy. Wisdom makes them a mentor. She says, jealous people sees people who are doing better, smarter, faster, and makes them the enemy. Wisdom sees better, smarter, faster, and makes them the mentor. You see, when you see someone making things happen, don't resent their progress, become a student of their process. That's what we all have to do, is not say, you know what, I don't like how you're doing it, and you don't agree with me, I'm putting you out. What can I learn from you is the answer. And here's why. This is the third thing I want to talk about. You have to choose the right examples. We are all being influenced by somebody. Probably multiple people. Sometimes we realize the influence they're having on us. Sometimes we don't realize the influence they're having on us. Sometimes we can see how we're becoming more like them or how we're taking on some of their traits. Other times we can't. We have to be intentional about choosing who we allow to influence us. I went through an exercise at the beginning of the year, and I deleted some podcasts that I was listening to, not because they were bad, but just because I didn't want their influence in my life anymore. I thought it was watering me down. I didn't like some of the things that I was processing after I listened to them. So I was like, okay, I'm not listening to this anymore. He says, dear friend, don't let this bad example influence you. Follow only what is good. A few weeks back, we talked about the inputs determine the outputs, right? What we listen to, who we hang out with, the things that we put in our mind, our heart, and our spirit are the things that are going to influence us. And he says what we should do is follow only what is good. Don't allow those people who are negative and jealous and divisive to influence you, because what will happen is you will find yourself having chosen a side and not even realized it. He said, remember that those who do good prove that they are God's children, and those who do evil prove that they do not know God. He says, there is some proof in what you do. How you live tells a story to the world about your spiritual life. And then he goes on to talk about Demetrius. This is the person who's in question that he's wanting support for. Everyone speaks highly of Demetrius, okay? So he's got a good report. He says, as does the truth itself. So he says he lives a life that matches up what the Word of God says. And he says, we ourselves can say the same for him, and you know we speak the truth. What I would tell you is, don't allow bad examples to influence you. You want to live a life where you are following the right people, allowing the right people to influence you, doing the things that God has called you to do. Why? Because the life you live tells a story. How you talk to people tells a story. Everything we do tells a story about Christ. When people drive on this lot, right? When we're telling a story from the moment they come into the parking lot until the time they leave. There is a story. There's something being said to them. Do we like them? Are we glad they're here? Or do we wish they went away? Now, I'm going to give you some very practical, this is as practical as I can get when it comes to how can you be more hospitable. I'll give you 3 things. One, several weeks ago, we told you that we were going to start adding an overflow room, making an overflow room ready. We were going to get it prepared, and we were going to add parking. Parking has been our limiting factor for some time. And so we started this parking lot, and there's a pic. You can put it up on the wall and show you the progress where we are right now, okay? So the parking lot piece is almost done. The overflow room, you can see the LED wall is installed, and it's ready for people. We won't have tables in there on a normal Sunday, but it's almost ready, okay? I was excited to find out, because when we started the parking lot project, we thought we were going to get about 55 spaces. We're going to end up with 75, give or take a few. So that's more than half what we already have. That's pretty significant. And here's practical ways you can be hospitable. You can give some money. Right? It's because some of you are sitting there like, how do I be more hospitable? You can give money so we can help pay for this to make room for the people that we want to come into this building. Right? That's the first step. Here's the second thing you can do. When the parking lots open up, the bumpers will be installed this week. When the parking lots open up, you can park back there. Right? I'm giving you listen, some of you will never go to China. You'll never go to Moldova. You'll never go to South America. You'll never go to Mexico. But you can be a missionary and park on the backside of this campus. Y'all think I'm joking? You can be a missionary and park on the backside of this campus so somebody who comes here for the first time doesn't have to figure out that we've got a parking lot back there. You can say one Sunday a month, and this morning in this room, this is not a big deal, which is unusual for the first service. But you can say, okay, when we open up the overflow room, one Sunday a month. You don't have to do it every Sunday. One Sunday a month, I'm willing to sit in the overflow room, me and my family. And I'm going to be a missionary, and I'm going to open up seats in this room. Don't stay home. Don't say I'm going to be a missionary and sleep in. Come on, right? You can be hospitable by making room. That's what being hospitable is about. If we make room for other people in our life, that is a way. I'm giving you some very practical ways, because some of you have been listening to this sermon like, I don't know what to do. I'm giving you some tips. You can give, you can park, you can sit. One more thing. In your seat is an invite card. That neighbor whose dog keeps pooping in your yard. I think that's a problem. You can invite them to church. That person in your neighborhood who you know is struggling right now, you can invite them to church. That new person who just moved in down the street and you hadn't had an opportunity to go meet them, take this in your hand. Go down, introduce yourself, and say, hey, would you join me on Easter? I would love to have you. As a matter of fact, we've made it great for the introverts because we've included a place for a stamp, a place for a note, and a place for an address. So if you don't want to go talk to them, guess what you can do? Get their address, write them a note, and mail it to them. Now, these are some very practical ways, because we can say, oh, we're hospitable and we want everybody to come and we want new people to come to Christ. But if we don't make room for them, we're lying. Right. If we don't welcome them, we're not being honest with ourselves. If we don't go out of our way to say, hey, we want to put you first, we're just fooling ourselves. And so as we talk about Christian hospitality, we have to take practical steps. 1, 2, 3. Listen, it doesn't cost a whole lot. For all you men, I drop my wife off at the door and I pick her up at the door. You can drop your wife off at the door and you can go park and make the trek. Trying to help some of you. Right? There are ways that you can participate in helping people feel welcome that are extremely easy and extremely practical.